New since 5, questions and concerns grow for Quincy residents living near a proposed apartment complex on 48th Street.
It's toward the top of the list is the potential fear that their properties could lose their value. But just how are properties valued here in the Gem City? WGEM's Zeke Shapiro is here now with the answer. Zeke?
Every parcel of land is worth something, but that number is not set in stone. With a proposed new apartment complex on the east side of Quincy, residents told me at last night's city council meeting they have a lot of questions. What decides the value of a property?
The size of a property, bathroom count, does it have a basement, those types of things.
For the owners of properties around the proposed apartment complex project, questions have arisen over how the property value of their homes could be affected. One of the answers lies in the market price.
Are we seeing sales prices coming down because of that, or are they holding steady? That market value and those sales are really going to be a driver for us.
Another argument in the property value debate is the type of apartment complex being built. Does a certain income housing translate to declining property value?
It all has to do with maintaining the property and taking care of what's there to help maintain the value of the neighborhood.
For realtors like Greg Zanger, there is a positive outlook on the project for both the city of Quincy and for property values.
I think Quincy needs more housing. We have a shortage in inventory. That's going to be a plus for Quincy. Homeowners that are wanting to sell, it's going to be a plus to them.
However, a positive outlook from a professional doesn't always translate to a positive result. Because of the fluctuating housing market, there simply is no way of accurately predicting what the property value effect could be. In the end, it mainly depends on the market and how well the property is upkept. Two factors that are always changing and can never be perfectly predicted. Unless residents have a crystal ball, the future of property values in the area will remain to be seen. Here is what's next. The rezoning resolution was tabled at Monday night's Quincy City Council meeting. It'll be brought back March 17th with hopes council members can better inform residents on the facts of the project. Daniel?
All right, thanks, Zeke. Last night, Mayor Trope explained that he hopes to hold a meeting with the city officials and the neighbors there. However, no date has been set yet.